General Ashley Moody. We have Sheriff Grady Judd from Polk County, Wayne Ivey, Sheriff of Brevard County, and then we have Judge Andrew Bain from the Ninth Judicial Circuit. The state of Florida is a law and order state, and that means we support the men and women who wear the uniform, who protect and serve. It means we have strong policies to hold criminals accountable for their misconduct. Prosecutors have a duty to faithfully enforce the law. One's political agenda cannot trump this solemn duty. Refusing to faithfully enforce the laws of Florida puts our communities in danger and victimizes innocent Floridians. Accordingly, I am today announcing the suspension of State Attorney Monique Worrell from the Ninth Judicial Circuit effective immediately. I'm appointing Judge Andrew Bain to take over as State Attorney for the Ninth Judicial Circuit. Judge Bain is currently a judge in Orlando. He is a native Floridian. He attended University of Miami, where he played football, and he received his law degree from Florida A&M Law School. And I trust that he will be a prosecutor that faithfully enforces the law and will keep the communities of Central Florida safe. Monique Worrell's administration of criminal justice in the Ninth Circuit has been clearly and fundamentally derelict so as to constitute both neglect of duty and incompetence. The policies or practices listed in our executive order suspending her that constitutes the grounds of suspension are as follows. One, a pattern or practice to avoid minimum mandatory sentences for gun crimes, pattern or practice to avoid minimum mandatory sentences for drug trafficking offenses, pattern and practice allowing juvenile offenders to avoid serious charges and incarceration altogether, pattern or practice to avoid valid and applicable sentencing enhancements, pattern or practice limiting charges for child pornography, pattern or practice for seeking withholding of adjudication in situations not permitted under Florida law. Prosecutors do have a certain amount of discretion about which cases to bring and which not. But what this state attorney has done is abuse that discretion and has effectively nullified certain laws in the state of Florida. That breaches her duties that she owes to the people of Florida under our state constitution and provides the basis for the suspension. And we can look to see all these different instances of people who have committed criminal offenses, victimized people because they were not held accountable in accordance with the laws of Florida when they had the opportunity to hold them accountable. In November of 2022, there was a 17-year-old Lorenzo Larry shot and killed his pregnant girlfriend, DeShayla Ferguson. He had previously been arrested in May of 2022 on several charges, including carrying a concealed firearm, possession of a firearm on school property, and criminal possession of a firearm by a minor, but he was released after all these arrests. Worrell's office did not act on any of these charges until after he killed his girlfriend and their unborn child. In 2018, Jazir Dobson invaded a home in Orange County and robbed the occupants at gunpoint. Dobson was charged with multiple counts of armed burglary with a firearm, robbery with a firearm, and false imprisonment. These charges carried a 10-year mandatory minimum sentence with a maximum of life in prison. After Worrell took office in 2021, 5 of the charges were not prosecuted and adjudication was withheld on the remaining. Withholding adjudication means that Dobson is not considered a convicted felon, and possession of a firearm by a felon would not apply if he were rearrested in the future. And he was sentenced to only 51 weeks of jail time, and he was sentenced as a youthful offender. And then just this past weekend, Worrell was at the center of another major controversy. Dayton VL was arrested in March of 2023 for sexual battery on a minor, as well as lewd and lascivious molestation. The arrest was made while he was on probation for another offense. That probation began in February of 2022, and yet he was still let out on bond and then tragically shot 2 Orlando police officers. I have no doubt that today's decision is not only consistent with the Constitution and laws of Florida, that we have a right to act. I know that today's decision, we had a duty to act to protect the public from this dereliction of duty. All right, we're going to have a few other people come up, so we'll start with our Attorney General, Ashley Moody.
Today is a serious, solemn day. Anytime this occurs in the state of Florida, it's not what we would have wanted for the people of the state of Florida. But nonetheless, it is absolutely imperative for the protection of our citizens, and we're fortunate to have a governor committed to both the rule of law and to holding elected officials accountable for doing the jobs that they swore to do. And in this instance, Ms. Worrell failed to do the job for which she was elected. The job for which she was elected to do is a simple one. It is to protect the public by prosecuting people. She will say, first and foremost, she has another agenda before she's a prosecutor. The job she was elected to do is not to be a legislator or not to be a judge. She is a prosecutor who swore to prosecute those that violate the law. When a prosecutor fails to follow the law and do her job, those failures naturally have allowed countless citizens of the Ninth Circuit to be unnecessarily victimized. If she were allowed to continue in this office, her failure would continue to cause needless pain, suffering, and death. There are two stages which it is imperative to separate a dangerous criminal from the community. That is, once a dangerous criminal is arrested, before they go to trial, what we call pretrial detention, and after they are convicted and sentenced. She fails in her practices in both of these, and that is why you are seeing people that are dangerous continuously victimize people in the Ninth Circuit, and I would submit to you in counties and other circuits. And I know that you'll hear from some that are interested in that today. I sat horrified as I watched the press conference on Monday regarding the two officers that were needlessly shot in the Ninth Circuit. Now, this has happened repeatedly where you have a prosecutor that comes out after something has happened and feels the need to start explaining herself. It is not normal for a prosecutor to come out repeatedly after we have seen tragedy strike and insinuate it's not my fault. I submit to you this was in a way to distract from where fault should have laid. Now, you just heard about the fact that on Monday she came out and insinuated that law enforcement was spreading misinformation, that she failed to act. Under the rules of criminal procedure and under the statutes of Florida, in order for a dangerous criminal to be detained pre-trial, the state attorney has to file a motion for pretrial detention. That was never done. Not only was it never filed, at the hearing, the prosecutor never asked for this gentleman, this criminal that raped a child and was dead to rights on that, stay in jail. The rule and the statute required for the judge to detain that person that motion be filed, and it was never filed. So we could sit up here and go through example after example where someone was murdered, where someone was robbed at gunpoint, and how charges were either undercharged or not filed in that circuit. I can tell you about letter we received from the sheriffs there that detailed why she is not acting in a way that is protecting the public. But I believe what is important today is to use numbers to show you, not only did she not file a motion for pretrial detention to keep people, dangerous criminals, prior to trial and detention, after sentencing, after conviction. The only way that can happen for you to go to jail is if you get charged. So if a prosecutor does not charge you or undercharges you, a judge can't sentence you accordingly. So let's look at the numbers. Ms. Worrell, the state attorney in the Ninth Circuit, has dismissed more charges of defendants than any other state attorney in the state of Florida during the same period. From January 2021 through June of 2022, the latest publicly available data on the state court administrator's website, Ms. Worrell dismissed or did not prosecute criminal cases against 16,236 adult defendants. To put her staggering numbers of dismissals into context and to counter what will undoubtedly be her defense that this was in some way political, I want to provide additional context. From January 2021 through June of 2022, the state attorney in Palm Beach County, who also happens to be of the same party, dismissed or no-filed against 4,296 adult defendants. Ms. Worrell is dismissing during the same period nearly 4 times the number of defendants as are being dismissed or not charged in Palm Beach County. Ms. Worrell is dismissing or no filing charges against almost 43%, almost half of defendants in the Ninth Circuit when they are arrested. Again, to give you context, the state attorney in the Miami-Dade County, again, similar party, is dismissing or no filing charges against only 22% of defendants. So as a percentage, this state attorney, Ms. Worrell, is dismissing or no filing charges against nearly double the defendants in Miami-Dade County. Miami-Dade County is a much bigger jurisdiction with more resource constraints than the Ninth Circuit, yet Ms. Worrell is dismissing charges or no filing at 2 times the rate. Indeed, Ms. Worrell is dismissing charges or no filing cases against defendants at a higher rate than any other prosecutor in any of our circuits in the state of Florida. And she is not choosing just to not prosecute adults who commit crimes. She frankly fails to prosecute juveniles at an equally high rate as adults. Florida Department of Juvenile Justice released a report a couple of weeks ago showing that she is no filing or not prosecuting juveniles who were referred after allegedly committing felonies 42% of the time, and violent felonies 41% of the time. She has by far the highest rate and raw number statewide of no files and failures to prosecute juveniles. And whether you are an adult or a juvenile, the reality in the Ninth Circuit currently is that nearly half of the time, Ms. Worrell's office is not going to prosecute you if you commit a crime. Officers may arrest you, they even may risk their lives arresting you. And if you're in the Ninth Circuit, nearly half the time, the state attorney will not follow through. That is incredibly dangerous to the people in the Ninth Circuit. And if you're unlucky enough to get prosecuted, and you're a drug trafficker or a violent felon committing crimes with a firearm, defendants who are dangerous and harm the community more than others, her office is likely not going to seek a minimum mandatory prison sentence or get much of a prison sentence. As prosecutors, we protect public safety by upholding the laws of this state, even laws with which we may personally disagree. Exercising discretion does not mean abdicating responsibility. Ms. Worrell is abdicating responsibility as the circuit's top prosecutor, and that undermines our laws and our legal system. Meaningful and effective improvement in our criminal justice system cannot result in defendants that suffer no consequences and are allowed to continuously victimize others. Justice is not served and the public safety is not advanced by failing to seek to hold dangerous criminals in custody before they face trial, and it is not advanced by failing to prosecute nearly half of the defendants committing crimes in your circuit. Ms. Worrell has made justice in the Ninth Circuit almost an arbitrary coin flip. She has failed to do her job, and the citizens of the Ninth Circuit have and will continue to be victimized by defendants she failed to prosecute. Again, I commend Governor DeSantis for taking this brave step and ensuring that the citizens of the Ninth Circuit have a prosecutor that puts their public safety as their very first agenda.
Thank you very much. When Governor DeSantis was first elected, he was asked by the media about these laws that held people in prison. Now, he was a brand new governor, and certainly he had the opportunity there in front of the media to say, well, I'll look into it, I'll check it out. But he looked the cameras in the eye and says, I believe in truth and sentencing. You see, this governor has always put the victims, has always put the law-abiding citizens ahead of the criminals. Always. And that's exactly what he's done here today. I've had the honor of being in law enforcement my entire adult life. And I know true, real leadership when I see true, real leadership. And that's what Governor DeSantis does every day when he comes to work. But let me talk about the suspended now, State Attorney Worrell. This is the Worrell effect. This is the bottom line. Yeah, Governor would have been disappointed if I didn't have some of these. You know what I'm saying? Lax prosecution plus you don't support law enforcement equals people aren't safe. That's right. The people of Orange and Osceola County trusted that she would do her job. I've talked to the sheriffs of Osceola and Orange, and I can tell you unequivocally, they fear for the citizens of the community because despite their best efforts, no matter how many criminals you arrest, if the state attorney won't hold them accountable, then the community is not safe. 2 Orlando police officers were shot in the face. You know why they were shot in the face? Because she didn't ask for a pretrial hold on a very, very dangerous person. So these police officers, out doing their job, encounter him. What does he think? Probably they're going to take me back to jail. Well, I'll just shoot them. Because heck, after all, I probably won't be prosecuted. I'll be let out again. You know, before I turn the podium over to my colleague and dear friend, I want to show you a popular meme. This is fine. As the house is on fire, our little hot dog here says, this is fine. He was a dog, now he's a hot dog because he's a house on fire. Well, I have another one. Monique Worrell says, this is fine. The fact that 2 police officers were shot in the face, this is fine. Despite criminals not being prosecuted, this is fine. Despite violent criminals victimizing people in the community, this is fine. I'll tell you what's fine. What's fine is Judge Bain. And Judge Bain's going to get after these criminals like he did to people on the football field. He was an all-star on the football field. He's going to be an all-star as the state attorney. And none of this would have been possible if we didn't have a governor, Governor DeSantis, who said, I'm going to do what's right. Thank you, Governor.
Good morning, everyone. And like Sheriff Judd, I've been in this business a long time, 43 years, about half as long as he has. I will tell you, I love you, Sheriff. I will tell you this. This is very simple. When it comes to law and order, Governor DeSantis is not playing. Governor DeSantis, like I and all the others standing up here, took an oath of office to protect our communities. He understands that government's one and only responsibility is to protect its citizens. And his actions today, without question, saved the lives of citizens in Central Florida. But they also saved the lives of citizens in other parts of this state. Because just like Sheriff Judd and the other surrounding counties, those criminals that were being let out, not charged, not prosecuted, coming into my county as well. In fact, the 2 Orlando police officers that were shot from Brevard County. I will tell you that no matter how good a job Commissioner Glass does, no matter how good a job Colonel Howes does, no matter how good a job Sheriff Judd or myself or the other chiefs and sheriffs in this state do to put bad people in jail, no matter how good a job we do to put bad people in jail, if the state attorney is not being the voice for the victims, our efforts are wasted. We arrest the same people over and over again. Central Florida has been exposed to a state attorney that ignored her oath. A state attorney that ignored being the voice of the victims. And today, Governor DeSantis is the voice for those victims. This is simple about law and order. It's not about anything else. It's not about politics. It's not about likes or dislikes. Actually, I'm going to say it is about likes or dislikes. Governor DeSantis likes elected leaders that do their job of putting bad people in jail. Folks, we don't want to become some of these other areas we see around the country. New York's, Los Angeles, Chicago, Detroit, Seattle. I can go on and on. We don't want to become those. And we need strong leaders that are going to say, enough is enough. No, we're not going to do the Hug a Thug program. No, we're not going to do soft on crime. What we are going to do is put bad people in jail. That's the oath we took. So, as I said, Governor DeSantis' actions today save lives. He remembers his oath. He remembers what it's like to be a prosecutor and to be the voice of victims, the only voice for some victims whose lives were stolen by criminals and then who were put back out on the street to harm others. Governor DeSantis understands that crime will rise to the level a community will tolerate. And he has zero tolerance for crime and even less for criminals. And I'm honored to stand here today and watch the action he's taking to save lives. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to first thank the governor for his leadership and trust in my ability to serve the people of the Ninth Circuit. I started my legal career at this office. This is where I learned from great attorneys like the late Pam Davis, Judge Jeff Ashton, Judge Gabrielle Sanders Morsi, and Ryan Williams, amongst many others. For me, this is the place where John Calvin's second purpose of the law came to life. The second purpose for the law is to restrain on evil. The law in and of itself cannot change the human heart. It can, however, serve to protect the righteous from the unjust. Sadly, instead of protecting the righteous from the unjust, the state attorney's office has allowed lawlessness to take root in our community. My goals as state attorney are to restore order and restore the faith in the law, restore our public trust, restore our relationship with our fellow justice partners in law enforcement, and to create lasting relationships for local service agencies and nonprofits that are here to help serve our community. Our prosecutors are responsible for holding criminals accountable for their actions. It's a simple thing, a simple job. The legislature told us what our job was in Chapter 27 of our statutes. It's a very simple job. We are here to prosecute crimes and to hold people accountable. My plan is to bring back that simple understanding, get back to the basics of what we're here to do. It does not accomplish anything to prosecute a case with no intent to stop crimes. I will make this office accountable to the community we serve and to ensure criminals who poison society, cause mayhem and murder are held accountable under the law. We will be good partners to law enforcement and create partnerships that can change the tide and provide a safer, more prosperous circuit and community. We will work to find solutions to the underlying issues that lead people to the criminal justice system, no matter whether the issue be mental health, homelessness, food insecurity, literacy, or lack of mentorship. To my fellow prosecutors, especially those who live in the community in our Ninth Circuit, but now work for other state attorneys, who have moved because you don't feel like there's a home for you here in your own community. I want to welcome you back to the state attorney's office with open arms. Thank you, Governor DeSantis, for your entrusting me with this position. God bless you all. the great state of Florida, and the United States of America.
All right. Best of luck. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Just wanted to add some clarity to what was being said there. They were talking about a state's attorney, an assigned state's attorney, that was basically the job of the state's attorney is to prosecute crimes in a certain area. This particular Monique Worrell was assigned to Orange and Osceola counties in Florida. That's basically Orlando and just southeast of Orlando. One of the last places in Florida where there's any level of Democrat influence. And of course, this is what they do. They try to get into the courts so that they can free their people, free their criminal people. And so basically the governor's office had had enough of her. And so they got rid of her. If you look up Worrell, Worrell, Florida, it's all over the mainstream media. They're saying it's all political. But that's why we had Ashley Moody come out. And she basically explained in numbers, in just stark numbers, how what is compared to Miami-Dade, South Orlando and Orlando is a very small area. And the numbers of people that were being let go were just untenable. And of course, it was all based on skin color. They won't say that, but it was. Everybody that was being released was of a certain ethnicity. And that's just the case. And it wasn't the case in Miami-Dade and other areas that are still somewhat blue-ish in Florida, but that's just something else you have to remember about Florida. What is blue in Florida is not blue in Minneapolis. What you would call our Democrats or our liberals would be seen as conservatives in places like Portland, Minneapolis, Detroit, Philadelphia. That's really the difference. And I've probably been remiss in my duty in explaining this. We have Democrats down here, don't get me wrong. We have one Democrat right now that is actually suing Joe Biden. We talked about the woman that was the former Nikki Haley, agriculture commissioner, and she partakes in cannabis. Okay, that's fine. Within the law, with medical cannabis is legal in Florida, but she also carried a pistol, carried a gun. Now, most people are like, wait a minute, she's a Democrat and she carries a gun? Yes, absolutely not. She carries a gun. She, uses cannabis, and the federal law says that you can't do both. And she sued Joe Biden, a Democrat in Florida that, has her issues with, Governor DeSantis, suing Joe Biden, suing the National Democrat Party. So I wanted to kind of clear that up here. And this is why, most people would say, hasn't DeSantis done enough to get rid of Democrats in Florida? No, absolutely not. There's no end to this. And that's why, he brought out Grady Judd and Wayne Ivey. Wayne Ivey is the sheriff of Brevard County, and Grady Judd is the sheriff of Polk County. Ran out of my head there for a minute. But this is, this would happen. You get these sheriffs that have been doing their job for 40, 45, 50 years. They've been around for a long time. They've seen a lot of Republican governors. They've seen a lot of Democrat leaders too. And for them to come out, these guys that have been doing it for decades and decades, I think in the case of Grady Judd, he's been doing it as long as I've been alive. And for them to say, this is leadership, this is how you fix things, this is what it is to do your job in the state of Florida. You're not talking about people that, work directly for DeSantis. So it's something that I guess until you live in Florida, you won't probably understand it. There's a lot of people that love to pile on Florida. I'm watching the comments here as I'm speaking. What did you miss? And we note 828. Okay, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version in Orlando, Orange and Osceola counties, there was a state's attorney that was basically trying to implement the BLM agenda from her position, and Governor DeSantis issued an executive order removing her from her position and installing somebody who's going to actually uphold the law. And today's announcement was a big deal, because this is, a lot of governors said, well, I'm going to get a lot of pushback, and I don't want to, I'm running for president, I don't want to make these people mad. You see, here's the deal. I mean, if Governor DeSantis was truly what people say, oh, he's part of this, what's the term they use? Not necessarily the swamp. Oh, they say he's part of some kind of a compromising cabal trying to keep Trump out of power. I'm telling you right now, he's farther to the right than Trump is. Governor DeSantis is farther to the right on many things than Trump is, and he's half his age-ish. He's 40-something years old, and, Trump's almost 80. So he's going to have a lot more energy, a lot more knowledge, and I'm telling you, a little over a year ago, DeSantis was starting to supplant Donald Trump in the polls. And I'm telling you, the left does not want to run against Governor DeSantis. So that, to me, that's what all of these prosecutions are about. Don't think they're trying to prosecute Trump because they don't want him to run. They knew exactly what would happen. They knew exactly what would happen. They knew if we start to prosecute Trump, that's going to ignite his base, and that's going to push out Governor DeSantis. That's why they keep doing it over and over and over again. You see, that's what a lot of people don't get, is that there's a lot of ignorant people that support Trump that say, well, they're trying to prosecute Trump to keep him from being popular. It's absolutely not the case. There's nobody on the... You have to think about this logically. If you're not going to vote for Donald Trump, you're not going to vote for Donald Trump. If you are going to vote for Donald Trump, you are. It's not going to matter whether he's prosecuted or not. Who would be the people that they would think would be influenced by the prosecution of Donald Trump? Nobody. Nobody. The only influence that would happen is you would see people move away from DeSantis and toward Trump for the nomination. But on a national stage, in a whoever versus Biden election, you're either going to vote for Biden or you're going to vote. There's nobody in the middle that's going, gosh, it's so close. You got Trump and you got and Biden, and gosh, I can't decide. There's nobody doing that. There's absolutely nobody doing that right now. We are a completely polarized nation. It's going to be about who shows up to vote for their guy. You see, that's going to be the key here. It's going to be about turnout, not about changing people's minds. Everybody's minds are already made up. The only place right now where there's any kind of discussion is DeSantis or Trump. They're over on the left. They're talking about not changing agenda. They're talking about whether Biden's going to be able to physically handle the job or not. But they're not talking about changing agenda. They're still pro-Target. They're still pro-Bud Light. They're still, pro-Garth Brooks. They're still pro all this. This is the case. But one thing that Trump doesn't have to do right now is run a state. Right now, the governor, even though he's, nominated for president, he still has a state to run. And this, I think, is, indicative of the man's values. That he would come back and that he would make an incredibly brave move to issue an executive order removing a state's attorney is a big, big deal. I've never heard of it. I'll be very honest with you. I've never heard of it being done before. Not in any state, not for any reason. Where a sitting governor issues an executive order removing somebody like that from power. But, he's got the law on his side, because he was a trained lawyer. So anyway, I wanted to just kind of give this live a shot. And I know there's a lot of people that have very strong feelings, but Honest to God, sometimes the best advice is look at things from the eyes of your enemy. At best, Donald Trump has 4 more years. And he's 80 years old. But Governor DeSantis is 40 years old, and he could serve for 8 years. Florida was a swing state until he became governor. And now they've given up. They don't want to see that happen on a national level. Prince Arcane, exactly right. They don't want to see that. So for the Democrats, the worst case scenario for the Democrats right now is Ron DeSantis being nominated. Because if he could take what we've done in Florida and export that on a national level, make America Florida, that would be, oh, here we go, Philip. Hey, Philip. I was waiting for one of these Yale School and Bones DeSantis. Really? So you're saying, Philip here, that an 18 and 19-year-old kid, the 2 years he was at Yale, that he played baseball, and then was so impressed with Yale that he decided to join the Navy. You're saying that during that time, it's the same thing as the Bushes, really? The guy who was raised by a guy who installed cable boxes and whose mother was a nurse. And he went to the baseball and went and played baseball. Philip, you're the kind of person that is too stupid to be allowed to vote. Honest to God. I'm for that. I really think, honest to God, if you need a test to become a citizen, you should pass a test to be able to vote. If you're that dumb that you would believe shit like that, then you're too stupid to be allowed to vote. Honest to God, because, like I said, people say, hey, we don't want a bunch of illegal immigrants. Do you know what the difference is between an illegal immigrant and a legal immigrant? Legal immigrants have to pass a test administered by the federal government to get their citizenship and then their right to vote. So if they have to pass a test to be able to vote, what about the rest of us? Well, I tell you what, Philip, if you're just a worshiper of Donald Trump, I mean, if I have to back somebody, I live in Florida. And I have for quite some time. My family's from the South. And it's funny that you people, you Trump lovers, you Trump cocksuckers, have to come here, and anytime you see anybody else with a new idea, you have to come and, be an asshole about it. Shows exactly how insecure you are. So thank you, Daniel. I'm a Florida fanboy, and DeSantis is perfect governor for a state. Ran as ethically as it is. Exactly. Trumpansies. It's just like chimps. It is exactly like what chimps do. So, anyway, sorry. I had to chew some ice there for a minute to calm down. So, bye, Phil. Thanks for stopping by. Sorry about that, man. Guys like that. It's just ridiculous. They got to think up whatever. Do you realize that Trump, those of you out there that are still a Trump guy, you realize he went to an Ivy League school, right? And do you realize that during the war, during Vietnam, when he was in college, he had his father bribe a doctor to diagnose him with flat feet and bone spurs so that he didn't have to go serve in Vietnam. And how do we know that was a fake diagnosis? Because while he was at that Ivy League school, he lettered in 3 sports. The whole basis of how super healthy Donald Trump is? Go look at his history. While on a medical deferment from serving in the military, he lettered in 3 sports. So, yeah, and then nobody wants to talk about Operation, he calls it Warp Speed. I'm going to think up a really good new name for it. Oh, what's the heart swelling? What's that condition called? where the heart swells that everybody's getting now from this. Atrial something. So, myocarditis, thank you. Yep. Operation myocarditis, warp bleed, exactly. Or what's that stuff they put in graphene oxide, Operation Graphene Oxide? Operation Nation Tracker? Yeah. I mean, this is it's just what the Trump folks just don't want to. Operation Snake Venom, exactly, would be another great way to refer to Operation Warped Speed. Yeah, Warped Bleed. Warped Bleed would be great. That's actually really good. Operation Warped Bleed. Operation Died Suddenly. Absolutely. So, Operation Clot Shot. Nobody wants to talk about this. There's a lot of Trumpanzees out there trying to rewrite history, trying to forget that it was Donald Trump that was in charge when all this went down, that it started in late 2019 and all through 2020, and all of the worst shit that happened under Trump. So, you see, when he had an opportunity to stand up and do the right thing. Julie, yep, retired RN. I know she's got to be very careful, but I'm sure Patriot. Here's the other thing too. And since we're here and we're talking about this, I want to bring up another point too about what happened when Trump took over. Talking about the Patriot nurse and nurses in general. Everybody talks about how great things were under Trump. Things were not great under Trump. In fact, you can look at some Trump tweets from 2018 talking about how high gas prices were getting. People say, oh, gas was so much cheaper under Trump. Not initially, it wasn't. Absolutely. And anybody who was on YouTube, including the Patriot nurse, go ask her. The big, heavy, hard hand of censorship on this platform got dropped in 2017, and all sorts of channels lost their platforms. All sorts of people got put out of business. And she was one of them. In fact, her lead-in video for her Patreon channel, I believe, was from 2017. Where she woke up one morning and YouTube had just taken down videos and given her strikes and demonetized stuff. And it's happened to her multiple times. Jennifer, Veterans for Truth, lost complete monetization completely because she was selling colloidal silver. So all this nonsense about how great 2017, 18, and 19 were, absolutely not. Absolutely not the case. My channel was a little bit different at the time in the sense that during 2018, I was talking a lot about Antarctica. That's when I was making most of the big finds using Google Earth Pro. So I got largely ignored by a lot of the heavy hand of censorship just for those few years, 17 and 18. But believe me, eventually, once 19 rolled around and I started talking about Ebola and I started talking about, hey, they're reporting something overseas that sounds like Ebola and it's really deadly. And then there was the issue in Fiji. All of a sudden, they came after me. It's why I had to stand up the Patreon channel. So it's, this whole thing about presidential candidates and bloodlines, guys, we all come from Europe. Most of the people that are on my channel, most all come from Europe. And in Europe, at that time, people that had children and procreated and had the kind of money that they could emigrate, it was a very expensive process that you had to foot for yourself to get on a boat and come to America. You had to be the descendant of a lord or a lady, or you had to, You had to have come from some background of note. And that all can be traced to some group or some family that was tied to somebody, who was married to somebody, who was part of a royal bloodline. That's how Europe was. That's just what Europe was. So this idea, that just because somebody can trace their bloodlines back to somebody who is part of the royal family, that just has to do with who was having kids. Who was way back in the 1600s and 1700s, who had money, who had the money and the ability to be married and do all this kind of stuff. You were tied somehow. So it's not now. It's more of a, to be third cousins or fourth cousins, to a royal is very rare, but it wasn't then. So I guess, I just wanted to cover that because it's probably it's a hard thing to make a video about. Oh, you mentioned Game of Thrones. It's all Game of Thrones. Do you know that, and I think I mentioned this in one of my videos, I can't remember if it was Patreon or whether it was on YouTube, that you're allowed to marry the Amish allow second cousins to be married. Did anybody know that? That you can't have a common grandfather, but you can have a common great-grandfather, and that's fine. Meaning your grandfathers can be brothers, and you can get married, but not your fathers. For them, that's distant enough. So, take what you want from that. I don't know that that's all that necessarily that important, but the reason Game of Thrones, there was a brother and sister that were carrying on together. That was also common in royal families, because sometimes brothers and sisters were more half brothers and half sisters. That was the other thing too. Back then, during the royal era, they didn't have DNA. So if a king had a wife and she couldn't get pregnant, if she went off and she had a one-nighter with one guy whose swimmers were a little better, and she ended up having a baby and she was married to the king, as long as he didn't completely look differently than the king, they didn't have the ability to do DNA testing. So there's a lot of royal lineages, that involve a lot of different hanky-panky going on. So just saying. It's just the way, especially in the Spanish court. You go back in the 15th and 16th and 17th centuries, it was just what people do. I guess I'm just going to leave it there. Yeah, to some extent, we are all to some level inbred. So, anyway. YOLO, don't believe anything, especially if you pay for it. You done bought nothing. Blah. I don't even know what that means. Don't forget Surf's White Irish says, like I said, when I say all, when they say presidents, that all presidents can trace their lineages back to royalty. Well, you also have to think about something too, that people that get in government usually have some relative in their past, an aunt, an uncle, a mom, a dad, somebody who was also in government. And how did they get in government? Well, they also. So sometimes just working in government is more of a social issue than it is a bloodline issue, that there's some cabal, some secret plan to only have these few people over here get involved in government. It's really, I come from a blue-collar black background, and I did blue-collar work, and so did my dad and his dad. There's no great conspiracy to keep us all in blue-collar work. It's just what you do. You go with what you know, so to speak. That's why a lot of farmers are multi-generation farmers. Truckers, the same thing. Dad was a trucker. Grandpa was a trucker. And it's the same thing in government service. It's just a comfort zone that people get in. And it's not a cabal. It's not a conspiracy. It's not, some grand plan to keep you down, so to speak. because he's somebody who grew up in a blue collar household. I don't know that they would necessarily be comfortable being a mayor, or being a councilman, or, being in positions like that. And that's what I think makes, Governor DeSantis, a very unique individual, because he was just a baseball player. He was just a baseball player. That's what he was. And, he got a baseball scholarship to Yale. And he chose Yale. And so he went up to Yale, and he was at Yale around a lot of guys that were in public service. Now, did he just say, I need to be president of the United States right away? No. You know what he did? He joined the Navy. He joined the Navy. He could have stayed at Yale. So, I mean, that he joined the Navy and went and served his country, I think speaks volumes to that. And then came back, and then what did he do? He was just a representative for St. Johns County. So he served at a low... This is the other thing that bothers me about Trump. If Trump cares so much about the country and about service and about... Why don't we see him at any point in his history attempting to be mayor of New York, for example, or mayor of Bedminster, New Jersey, or governor of New York? Why don't we see him try, or even governor of Florida? Why didn't we see him do anything at all, make any type of attempt whatsoever to be at any level of government prior to just being president of the United States? We see that with Governor DeSantis. He was a representative, and, then he was a governor. This is why I'm a DeSantis guy. The house he was living in when he got elected governor is right up the road. It's about, maybe from here, about not even an hour. And it's normal for a Florida house. It's normal. I mean, it's not some little shack, but it's definitely, very nondescript, very average, very normal dude. He didn't have 39 golf courses across the country. I'll tell you that. He didn't have a chateau that was a rowboat's ride away from Little St. John's Island, if you know what I mean. Private clubs. I mean, seriously. Can somebody answer that too, by the way? Port St. Joe, Florida. Cool. I mean, that's my question. Why shouldn't Trump, if he's got all of these financial issues, why doesn't he just sell a couple of golf courses? Why wouldn't he just say, you know what? Americans right now are suffering under Joe Biden. They are suffering under high inflation. I don't want a dime of your money. I'm a billionaire. I have lots of money. In order to serve this country and become president, I'm going to sell, of my 39 golf courses, I'm going to sell 3 of them. I'm going to sell 3 of them, and I'm going to take the proceeds, and I'm going to use that to finance my defense against this horrible prosecution. I'm going to use that to finance the money to run. Why is he raising money from normal, average, everyday, suffering people? Why is Trump doing that? When he owns 39, that's just golf courses. That doesn't include hotels. So, anyway, we'll leave it there. Welcome Panama City, welcome Bradenton, welcome Port St. Joe. It's a wonderful thing to see the governor out there again like he was back in 21. Newport Richie, welcome. It's a great thing to see him continuing to do what he did to fight and to push back. See, he could have let this go. Nobody on a national stage would care about what's going on in Orange and Osceola counties in Florida. But he does still. As a governor, people came to him and said, this is wrong. This is wrong. We've had a couple of police officers that got shot by somebody that should have been in prison. And we have this one person we can identify as the problem. And then he says, you know what? I'm going to stop campaigning. I'm going to come back to Florida. I'm going to write an executive order removing this person because it's the right thing to do. That's leadership. That is leadership. Welcome, North Chicago, otherwise known as Southwest Wisconsin. I say that, Donald Anderson, because I was born and raised in northern Indiana, and Chicago is one of the greatest pestilences and plagues on this country. Welcome, Michigan. I tell you what, there was a statistic out. Everybody's all aware of, U.S. gun violence and all the gun violence that goes on across the country. That we were something like we're in the top 10 in the world in gun violence. But if you took out, there were 5 cities in America, 5 cities: Los Angeles, St. Louis, Chicago, Detroit, and Philadelphia. If you took out those 5 cities, we dropped into the lowest 5 in gun violence. If you took out those 5 Democrat-run cities and the gun violence from there, and you took them out, the remaining gun violence that would be reported in North America would put us in the bottom 5 or 6 countries in the whole world. So, this is the reality, and Florida's got a lot of big cities, and I'll tell you what, and I guess I'll leave with this. The reason I said that is that, people see news from Florida in the MSM, and it's usually news from one of the big blue areas. From someplace like Orlando or Tampa or Miami. That's not most of Florida. Most of Florida is extremely normal and extremely safe. I mean, very much so. Very clean, very nice, very polite. Everybody gets along. Everybody supports each other. You just don't see the bullshit like you see in other places. And that's, I think Florida gets way... people that move here don't realize it until they move here, how safe they are. People don't, and I'm not trying to say this to knock the Patriot nurse. It actually makes me sad that in Knoxville, Tennessee, she feels like she's in so much danger that she has to be armed everywhere she goes and sleep with a rifle next to her. People in Florida love their guns, but they don't sleep with them. And I'm not saying that she's wrong for doing that. If she feels that danger, like she's in that much danger in Tennessee, then God bless her for doing it. I would just say that there's other options. That if you feel like it's so dangerous that you've got to be armed everywhere you go and sleep with your arms. I mean, I have a gun in the closet. But yeah, you're more likely to get chumped by a barracuda. Or a shark, absolutely. So, I guess it would depend on Icewell. Oh, here we go. So, Icewell Flat Earth. Nothing positive to say today. Pedo-loving Icewell Flat Earth. Shows what happens, though, when you have a name like Icewell Flat Earth and you're that stupid that you can't comprehend other things as well. So, all right. We're pushing an hour here, so I will let this go. But great news out of Florida. Just to recap. Orange, Osceola County, Florida's had a plague. The plague was this Monique Worrell. She was a state's attorney, and she was basically letting all BLM types do whatever the hell they wanted to do. And finally, a couple of cops got shot, and the governor said, enough's enough. He came back to the state, issued an executive order, removed her from her position, and replaced her. And that's the good news of the day. So I will leave it there. God bless. Pray for each other, everyone. Lift each other up. There's, of course, brand new video over at Patreon. Very controversial. A warning, there's going to be some imagery that might ruffle a few snowflakes' feathers, but that's just the case. So, very much appreciate you guys here over there making a huge difference. It's a difficult thing to explain about how YouTube is collapsing. It really is, as far as an advertising market goes. It still has reach.
but the advertising is not what it was. So if you can join us over at Patreon, it's only $1. $1 a month. That's it. And if you pay for an entire year, you get an entire year, I think, for $10.80. So anyway, thank you so much for doing it. Very much appreciate it. God bless. Pray for each other, lift each other up, like, share, subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.